You think discipline is boring? Good. That's exactly why you don't have it. You've trained your brain to chase cheap stimulation like a dog chasing scraps, and now anything that actually builds power feels boring to you. That's not a personality trait. That's weakness. That's a broken reward system. The truth is simple. If it entertains you, it probably doesn't elevate you. And if it elevates you, it will demand silence, repetition, and control. The very things you've been avoiding your entire life. You've been lied to. You were told passion comes first, excitement drives success, and you need to feel good to perform. Wrong. Discipline feels like nothing. No dopamine rush, no applause, no fireworks, just cold mechanical execution. That's why most men never reach anything meaningful. They're addicted to noise. Discipline is quiet. It's like speaking in a language nobody around you understands. While the world screams for attention, you move in silence, repeating the same actions until they carve a new identity into your bones. Speaking in tongues isn't some mystical nonsense. It's the transformation of your internal language. Weak men speak comfort, excuses, and emotion. Powerful men speak action, repetition, and results. When you develop discipline, you stop negotiating with yourself. You stop asking, do I feel like it? You give commands and you execute. That's a different language. That's a higher frequency. Most people can't even hear it, let alone speak it. And that's why they stay average. Discipline rewires who you are, not what you do who you are. You don't try to be disciplined. You become the type of man who doesn't break his own word. Every boring repetition is a vote for a stronger identity. Every time you ignore your feelings and execute anyway, you separate yourself from the herd. This is dominance, not shouting, not flexing. Control, absolute control over your mind, your body, your time. While others chase pleasure, you build power. And power always wins in the long run. The reality you don't want to hear is this. If you're bored, you're still a slave to stimulation. You haven't built the internal structure required to operate at a high level. Winners don't need excitement. They need results. And results come from doing the same thing over and over again until it's perfect. That repetition you hate, that's the forge. That's where men are built, not in moments of hype, but in hours of silent, relentless work. You think discipline is the problem because it feels boring, but the real problem is you've trained your brain to depend on constant stimulation. Your entire system is wired for instant reward scrolling, entertainment, quick wins, easy comfort. So when something requires effort without immediate payoff, your mind rejects it. Not because it's wrong, but because you're not in control. You're reacting, not deciding. That's the difference between a man who commands his life and one who is controlled by it. Pay attention to what you call boring. It's not random. It's always the things that demand consistency, patience, and delayed gratification. Waking up early, training when you don't feel like it, working without distractions, building something slowly instead of chasing quick validation. None of these give you instant pleasure, and that's exactly why your brain resists them. You've been conditioned to expect reward first and effort second. Discipline flips that completely. Effort comes first, reward comes later, and most people never adapt to that reversal. This is where most men fail without even realizing it. They think they lack motivation, but motivation isn't the issue. The issue is dependency. When your mind is addicted to stimulation, anything that doesn't immediately excite you feels like punishment. So you avoid it, you delay it, you replace it with something easier. And over time, that pattern becomes your identity, not because you chose it, but because you never challenged it. Look at it objectively. If something is comfortable, entertaining, and easy to repeat, it's probably not building anything meaningful. It's maintaining your current level, not elevating it. Growth demands friction. It demands doing things that don't feel rewarding in the moment. That's the price. And if you're not willing to pay that price consistently, you're choosing stagnation, whether you admit it or not. The truth is, discipline isn't boring. It's just not designed to entertain you. It's designed to transform you, and transformation is a slow, controlled process. There's no rush, no constant excitement, no external validation, just repetition and improvement, day after day. Most people can't handle that because they need to feel something to keep going. They rely on emotions to drive action, but emotions are unstable. They change constantly. If your actions depend on how you feel, your progress will always be inconsistent. This is where control comes in. Discipline forces you to act independently of your emotions. You don't wait to feel ready. You don't negotiate with yourself. You execute because it's required, not because it's exciting. That shift is what separates high-level performers from everyone else. It's not intelligence, it's not talent, it's control over behavior, regardless of internal resistance. And once you understand this, everything becomes clear. The boredom you feel isn't a signal to stop. It's a signal that you're finally doing something that matters. Something that isn't feeding your addiction to stimulation. Something that's actually building structure, strength, and resilience. The discomfort, the lack of excitement, the monotony, that's the process working exactly as it should. Most people run from that feeling. They go back to what's easy, what's familiar, what gives them a quick hit of satisfaction. And they stay stuck. The ones who move forward are the ones who recognize that boredom is part of the process, not a problem to solve. They don't need constant engagement. They don't need to be entertained. They understand that real progress is quiet, repetitive, and often uncomfortable. So when you say discipline feels boring, what you're really saying is you're not used to operating without stimulation. You're not used to doing things that don't immediately reward you. And that's exactly why discipline is necessary. Because until you break that dependency, you're not in control. You're just following whatever feels good in the moment. And that will never lead you anywhere worth going. You've been conditioned to believe that motivation is the engine of success, that you need to feel inspired before you act. That idea has destroyed more potential than failure ever could. Because the moment you rely on motivation, you hand control of your life over to something unstable. Motivation is inconsistent. It rises, it drops, it disappears without warning. If your actions depend on it, your results will always be unpredictable. High performers understand this early. They don't wait to feel ready. They operate on command. There's a clear divide between people who move forward and people who stay stuck. One group asks, "Do I feel like doing this?" The other group says, "This needs to be done," and they execute. No debate, no delay. That difference might look small, but it changes everything. When you rely on motivation, you create a gap between intention and action. In that gap, excuses grow. Doubt grows. Distraction takes over. When you operate on command, that gap disappears. You remove the space where weakness lives. Think about how fragile motivation really is. It depends on mood, environment, energy levels, even external validation. One bad night of sleep, one negative comment, one moment of discomfort, and it's gone. Now what? Most people stop. They wait. They tell themselves they'll start again when they feel better. That cycle repeats until months pass with no real progress. Meanwhile, the person who ignores motivation entirely continues moving, stacking results, building momentum. Execution without emotion is a skill, and like any skill, it has to be trained. At first, it feels unnatural. Your mind will push back. It will try to convince you to wait, to delay, to negotiate. It will offer you comfort in exchange for progress. If you accept that trade, you lose. Every time you override that internal resistance and act anyway, you strengthen your ability to operate under any condition. You become reliable, not occasionally productive, not sometimes focused, consistently effective. This is where most people misunderstand discipline. They think it's about forcing yourself when you're struggling. That's only part of it. Real discipline is removing the need for motivation entirely. It's building systems and standards that don't change based on how you feel. You don't decide whether to train, you train. You don't decide whether to work, you work. The decision was already made in advance. Your job is simply to follow through. There's a level of professionalism in this approach that most people never reach. Professionals don't rely on emotion. They rely on standards. Imagine a pilot deciding whether to follow procedure based on how motivated he feels. Imagine a surgeon operating only when inspired. It sounds absurd because in high-stakes environments, consistency is everything. Your life operates on the same principle whether you acknowledge it or not. The stakes are just spread over time, instead of concentrated in a single moment. Once you adopt this mindset, your identity begins to shift. You stop seeing yourself as someone who tries to be productive and start seeing yourself as someone who executes regardless of conditions. That shift removes hesitation. It removes internal conflict. You no longer argue with yourself about what needs to be done. You already know, and you act accordingly. That clarity is power. The real advantage here isn't just productivity, it's control. When you can act without needing to feel motivated, you're no longer at the mercy of your internal state. You can perform when you're tired, when you're stressed, when you're not in the mood. That ability compounds over time. While others wait for the perfect moment, you create progress in imperfect conditions. That's how separation happens. Most people will never reach this level because they're too attached to comfort. They want to feel good while they work. They want the process to be enjoyable. But the process isn't designed for enjoyment. It's designed for results. And results come from consistent, controlled action, not from temporary emotional spikes. The sooner you detach from the idea that you need motivation, the faster you move toward a system that actually works. You're chasing big wins, dramatic breakthroughs, and moments that make you feel like you've finally made it. That mindset is exactly why you're stuck. Real power doesn't come from occasional intensity. It comes from repetition. The same actions executed daily without variation, without emotion, without needing to feel anything about it. That's where separation happens. Not in bursts of effort, but in controlled, repeated execution that most people don't have the patience to sustain. The reason repetition feels unbearable to you is because it exposes your lack of discipline. There's no novelty, no excitement, no external validation. Just you, the task, and the requirement to perform again and again. Most people break in that environment. They start looking for shortcuts, new strategies, anything that gives them a sense of progress without demanding consistency. They confuse change with improvement. They jump from one thing to another, never staying long enough to master anything. Mastery is built through repetition, not variety. You don't get better by doing something once with high intensity. You get better by doing it hundreds, thousands of times until it becomes automatic, until your standards rise without conscious effort, until your baseline performance is higher than most people's peak. That only happens when you commit to the process, not the outcome. When you focus on executing the same actions regardless of how you feel about them. Every repetition is a signal to your brain. It tells you what matters. It reinforces identity. If you repeat weak actions, you become weak. If you repeat disciplined actions, you become disciplined. It's that simple, but most people ignore it because it lacks immediate reward. They want to feel progress instantly. They want visible results quickly. When that doesn't happen, they assume something is wrong and they quit or change direction. The reality is, repetition compounds in ways you don't see immediately. At first, it feels like nothing is happening. The results are minimal. The effort feels disproportionate to the outcome. This is the phase where most people stop. They interpret slow progress as failure. They don't realize that this is the exact stage where the foundation is being built. Invisible, but critical. The ones who continue through this phase eventually reach a point where the results accelerate. Not because they changed what they were doing, but because they stayed consistent long enough for the compound effect to take hold. There's also a psychological shift that comes with repetition. The more you do something, the less resistance you feel. What once required effort becomes standard. What once felt difficult becomes routine. This is how high performers operate. They don't rely on bursts of motivation because their habits carry them forward. Their systems are stronger than their emotions. That's the advantage repetition creates. It reduces the need for willpower. You also eliminate decision fatigue. When you repeat the same core actions daily, you don't waste energy deciding what to do next. You already know that clarity allows you to focus on execution instead of hesitation. Most people drain their mental energy on decisions, not actions. They think too much, plan too much, analyze too much, and as a result, they do less. Repetition removes that problem entirely. Another thing most people underestimate is how repetition sharpens precision. When you perform the same task repeatedly, you start noticing small inefficiencies. You refine your approach. You improve details that others don't even see. Over time, these small improvements create a massive gap between you and everyone else. Not because you're doing something completely different, but because you're doing the same thing at a higher level. This is where real separation is built. Not in complexity, but in simplicity, executed consistently. While others chase new methods, new ideas, new distractions, you stay locked into what works. You refine it, you repeat it, you master it. That level of focus is rare because it requires patience, control, and the ability to ignore the constant urge for novelty. Most people will never reach this level because they underestimate how powerful repetition really is. They see it as boring, limiting, unnecessary. In reality, it's the foundation of everything that lasts. Without it, you're just relying on temporary effort and hoping for permanent results. And that's a losing strategy every time. You've been taught to trust your feelings, to listen to yourself, to act when it feels right. That advice sounds good, but it's one of the most destructive ideas you can adopt if you want control. Your feelings are inconsistent, reactive, and easily influenced. They change based on sleep, stress, environment, even what you consumed an hour ago. Building your life around something that unstable guarantees inconsistency. and inconsistency guarantees mediocrity. Look at your own patterns honestly. The days you feel motivated, you act. The days you don't, you hesitate, delay, or avoid entirely. That means your progress is controlled by mood, not intention. You're not leading your life. You're reacting to it. High-level performers operate differently. They don't give their feelings authority. They recognize them, but they don't obey them. There's a clear separation between internal state and external action. The problem isn't that you have emotions. The problem is that you treat them as instructions. Feeling tired becomes a reason to stop. Feeling unmotivated becomes a reason to delay. Feeling discomfort becomes a signal to avoid. That pattern reinforces itself over time. Every time you act based on how you feel, you strengthen the habit of emotional dependence. You train yourself to seek comfort instead of progress. Control starts when you break that connection, when you understand that feelings are temporary signals, not commands. You can feel tired and still execute. You can feel resistance and still move forward. You can feel doubt and still perform at a high level. That's not natural at first. It requires conscious effort. Your mind will push back because it's used to being in charge. But the more you override it, the weaker that resistance becomes. There's a shift that happens when you stop prioritizing feelings. Your actions become stable, predictable, reliable. You don't need the perfect mindset to perform. You don't need the right mood. You operate based on standards, not emotions. This is what professionalism looks like. It's not about intensity or passion. It's about consistency under all conditions. Most people never reach this level because they're too attached to comfort. They want the process to feel good. They want to enjoy every step. That expectation sets them up to fail. Because the process isn't designed for comfort. It's designed for results. And results often require doing things that feel uncomfortable, repetitive, and mentally demanding. If you avoid those feelings, you avoid progress. When you take control of your actions, something deeper changes your identity. You stop seeing yourself as someone who reacts and start seeing yourself as someone who decides. That shift is critical because identity drives behavior more than anything else. If you believe you're someone who follows through regardless of how you feel, your actions will align with that belief, not occasionally, but consistently. This also removes internal conflict. Most people waste energy arguing with themselves. One part of them wants progress, the other wants comfort. That constant negotiation drains focus and slows everything down. When you eliminate the role of feelings in decision-making, that conflict disappears. There's no debate. The action is already defined. Your job is to execute. Another advantage is resilience. When your actions aren't tied to your emotional state, external situations lose their power over you. Bad days don't stop you. Stress doesn't derail you. You maintain performance regardless of what's happening around you. That stability creates long-term momentum. While others fluctuate, you continue moving forward. This is where real control exists. Not in eliminating emotions, but in refusing to let them dictate your behavior. You acknowledge them, but you don't submit to them. You act based on what needs to be done, not on what feels comfortable in the moment. That separation is what allows you to build something consistent, something reliable, something strong enough to withstand pressure. Most people never develop this level of control because it requires discipline at a level they're not willing to commit to. It requires acting when it's inconvenient, when it's uncomfortable, when there's no immediate reward. But that's exactly why it works. Because it removes randomness from your actions and replaces it with precision. And precision, applied consistently, is what creates real results. You've been conditioned to believe that visibility equals progress. That if you're not talking about it, posting it, or getting recognition for it, it somehow doesn't count. That mindset keeps you trapped in performance instead of production. Noise feels productive because it gives immediate feedback, likes, comments, attention. But none of that builds anything real. It just feeds your need to be seen. And the more you depend on that, the less you actually produce. Watch how most people operate. They announce plans before they execute them. They talk about goals more than they work on them. They seek validation at every stage, as if approval from others is required to continue. That behavior isn't confidence. It's insecurity disguised as ambition. Because if you were truly focused, you wouldn't need to broadcast anything. You'd be too busy building. Silence is uncomfortable because it removes that external feedback. There's no applause, no recognition, no immediate proof that what you're doing matters, just effort, time, and delayed results. Most people can't handle that. They need reassurance. They need to feel like they're progressing, even if they're not. So they fill the gap with noise constant updates, discussions, distractions. It creates the illusion of movement without actual progress. Real growth doesn't operate like that. It's quiet, controlled, and often invisible for long periods. You put in the work without anyone noticing. You improve without announcing it. You refine your skills without needing acknowledgement. That process builds something far more valuable than attention. It builds capability. And capability doesn't need validation. It proves itself when it's required. There's also a strategic advantage to silence that most people overlook. When you move quietly, you eliminate pressure. No expectations, no external judgment, no need to perform for others. You're free to focus entirely on execution. That focus allows you to go deeper, to improve faster, to correct mistakes without the distraction of being watched. While others are managing perception, you're building substance. Noise, on the other hand, divides your attention. You're not just work, you're also thinking about how it looks, how it's received, how it compares. That split focus weakens your output. You become more concerned with appearing productive than actually being productive. Over time, that gap widens. You might look like you're progressing, but the results don't match the image. Silence forces you to confront reality. Without external validation, the only measure you have is your actual performance. You can't hide behind opinions or perception. Either you're improving or you're not. That level of honesty is uncomfortable, but it's necessary because it removes illusions and replaces them with clarity. And clarity allows you to adjust, refine, and improve with precision. There's also a level of discipline required to stay silent. It means resisting the urge to share every step, to seek approval, to prove yourself prematurely. It means trusting the process enough to let results speak later. That restraint builds control. It strengthens your ability to focus without distraction. It trains you to prioritize long-term outcomes over short-term recognition. High-level performers understand this. They don't reveal everything they're doing. They don't seek attention for every action. They operate with intention, not for display. When results finally show, they're undeniable. Not because they were constantly highlighted, but because they were built consistently over time without interruption. Most people never reach that level because they're addicted to visibility. They want to be seen before they've earned it. They want recognition before they've produced anything substantial. That impatience keeps them stuck in cycles of talking, planning, and seeking approval instead of executing. When you shift away from noise and commit to silent work, everything changes. Your focus sharpens, your standards rise, your output improves. You stop wasting energy on things that don't matter and direct it entirely toward building something real. And while others are still trying to be noticed, you're becoming someone who can't be ignored. You've been trained to believe that if something feels easy and enjoyable, it must be right for you. That idea is comfortable, but it's also the reason you're not progressing. Ease and entertainment are designed to keep you where you are. They require no growth, no adaptation, no resistance. They maintain your current level, not elevate it. The moment something becomes truly valuable, it demands effort, structure, and discomfort. That's the trade most people refuse to accept. Look at the pattern. The things that are easy to start are also easy to abandon. They don't require commitment, so they don't build it. They don't challenge your limits, so your limits stay the same. You can engage with them endlessly and still remain exactly where you began. That's the trap. You feel active, you feel engaged, but you're not actually moving forward. You're just passing time in a way that feels productive. Entertainment amplifies this problem. It gives you a constant stream of stimulation without requiring anything in return. Your brain gets used to high levels of input with zero output. Over time, this conditions you to avoid anything that demands effort without immediate reward. The gap between what feels good and what actually builds results becomes wider, and eventually, anything meaningful starts to feel like a burden. The reality is, meaningful progress is built on resistance. It requires you to engage with tasks that are repetitive, mentally demanding, and often uncomfortable. There's no instant gratification, no immediate payoff. Just a process that compounds over time. That's why it works, because it filters out anyone who isn't willing to endure that discomfort consistently. Most people try to find a way around this. They look for shortcuts, optimizations, easier methods. They want the result without the process. But every shortcut comes with a cost. You might save time in the moment, but you lose depth, skill, and long-term capability. What you gain quickly, you lose just as quickly. What you build slowly, with effort, tends to last. There's also a psychological shift that happens when you stop chasing ease. You start valuing effort itself. You begin to see difficulty not as a problem, but as a signal. If something is challenging, it means it's stretching you. It's forcing adaptation. That's where growth happens. Not in comfort, but in controlled stress. The more you expose yourself to that, the more capable you become. This doesn't mean everything has to feel painful or extreme. It means you stop using ease as a measure of value. You stop asking, is this comfortable? And start asking, is this effective? That shift changes your decisions completely. You choose actions based on their long-term impact, not their short-term feeling. And that's where real progress begins. Another thing most people ignore is how quickly you adapt to easy environments. What once felt enjoyable becomes normal, then boring, then insufficient. You need more stimulation to feel the same level of engagement. That cycle keeps you chasing higher levels of entertainment while your tolerance for effort decreases. It's a downward spiral. The more you indulge it, the harder it becomes to do anything meaningful. When you deliberately choose difficult, structured work, you reverse that process. Your tolerance for effort increases. Tasks that once felt hard become manageable. Your baseline shifts. You don't need constant stimulation to stay engaged. You can focus, execute, and produce without distraction. That's a competitive advantage most people never develop. There's a clear pattern in high performers. They don't optimize for comfort. They optimize for results. They accept that the process will often feel repetitive, demanding, and sometimes monotonous. But they also understand that this is where real value is created, not in moments of ease, but in sustained effort over time. If you continue to choose what's easy and entertaining, you'll stay in a cycle of temporary satisfaction with no real progress. You'll feel busy, but you won't build anything substantial. The moment you shift toward what's structured, challenging, and consistent, everything changes. Not immediately, but inevitably, because the process you're choosing is designed to produce results, whether it feels good or not. So here's the truth, and it's brutal. Discipline will never feel fun. It will never feel exciting. And if you're waiting for it to, you've already lost. The men who win are the ones who move without emotion, who act without hesitation, who execute without needing validation. They didn't care if it's boring. They care that it works. You can keep chasing stimulation like everyone else, or you can step into a higher level of existence where your actions are controlled, precise, and unstoppable. But you don't get both. You don't get comfort and power. Choose.